Yo, what's up, people? How's it going out there? It's your boy S Rank. Let's talk a little bit about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Checked it out at the Thursday night premiere. Got some of that premiere swag, which they're starting to hand out now. Promotional material, I guess, on a poster board. It's supposed to look a bit like an album cover. It's got that prog rock vibe from the 70s and 80s. Pretty cool. Probably get that framed. Some buttons, obviously, and you're welcome. Some Rocket Raccoon sayings. Might pop those on my jean vest. Punk rock myself up a little bit more. I just noticed I'm wearing a shirt with my face on it, basically. Is what it is. Sometimes I do that, I suppose. So let's get to it. Is Volume 2 any good? Did I hate it? Did I love it? I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. I'll have to see it a couple more times to gauge where I'm at with it, relative to the other Marvel movies. I don't think it is as good as the first movie. There's some obvious reasons for that. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, I guess, must be called Volume 1 retroactively, now that this is Volume 2. That movie was a breath of fresh air. It was original. It was doing its own thing. Obviously, it harkened back to those old pulp adventure movies. Has kind of an Indiana Jones and obviously Star Wars vibe, but it's its own thing. I'd say it's probably most similar to something like Farscape, the TV show, but its own tone, its own original thing. This movie is still very, very good, but obviously it has a formula that's been established that it can follow. So it's not as, it's not as original, but it's still very good. Most of the problems I have with the movie are going to be very nitpicky. I don't want to just lavish praise on it. I do think it's a great movie. I do have some problems with it. So let's get to it. So first off, I'll say that the most obvious way to me that this movie is inferior to the previous movie is that the soundtrack is not as strong. The Awesome Mix Volume 1 of the first movie was really, it's such a great mix of songs. It's an amazing soundtrack. Obviously, pretty much critically lauded. The Volume 2 is still very good. The music is very good, and I would say that The Chain by Fleetwood Mac is by far the best song on either of the soundtracks, but just looking at them as a whole, I don't think the soundtrack of Volume 2 holds up as well compared to the first one. It needed some heart, man. Get some Magic Man in there when Kurt Russell makes his debut. I would love that so much. I love Heart. Amazing. But it was not to be. We'll have to hold out for Volume 3. Another problem, a minor problem I have with the implementation of the soundtrack in this movie is that it is not as organic as it was in the first movie. There are some moments in the film where it's kind of forced. They're trying to write into the story, like, why would a song be playing here right now? It works in some cases. It doesn't work as well in others. At the beginning of the movie, there will be some spoilers in this video. At the beginning of the movie, they're setting up to defend some batteries. I forget what they're called. They belong to the Sovereigns. They've been hired to protect some batteries from a intergalactic threat. It looks like some monster from the Cancerverse, basically, if you read comics. It's like a squiddy tentacle monster. Shades of Lovecraft. But Rocket is trying to hook up a sound system so that they can listen to music while they're doing it. And Groot is dancing along while they're fighting the monster. Great opening. It harkens back to the opening of the first movie, or not the opening, but the first moment we see adult Peter Quill, where he's dancing on the planet. It has shades of that, but it also has the team together. So it's a nice contrast of how the character has progressed since the beginning of the first movie. So I think that scene really works well. There are moments in the movie where it doesn't work well, where they're trying to shoehorn in the soundtrack on the Ravager ship a couple times. But it's a nitpick. They're not major issues, but You know, you might notice it when you're watching the movie that they're trying to figure out why would they be listening to music right now. I don't know, like, I'm not sure if it's necessarily something that you would even need to explain. You can just have a song in the background. You know, you score the movie to begin with. The characters don't necessarily need to be listening to the music for the audience to be listening to the music. It'd be like in the first movie when the Guardians are grouped up and they're putting on their Ravager gear and Cherry Bomb is playing. Like, in my mind, I can't recall if that was like, did they put the mix on, or was that just something playing in the background for the audience? I don't know. Maybe I'll have to go back and watch it and see if that was the case or not. So let's get into the story of the movie. The premise of the movie, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie or any of the previews, is that Kurt Russell, the great and mighty Kurt Russell, the greatest man who ever lived, star of the greatest movie ever created, Big Trouble in Little China, is Peter Quill's dad. How does that play out? Plays out pretty good because Kurt Russell is a gift from the gods to humanity, and he's great in everything he's ever been in, as far as I can recall. So he does a great job as Ego, the living planet. So this is I would say, as spoiler alert, he ultimately ends up as the antagonist in the movie. You know, at the beginning of the movie, they establish these people, the Sovereigns, as a threat. They mostly take a backseat. They show up again later. They're kind of just a thorn in their sides. They're not the primary threat of the movie. That ultimately ends up as being Ego. Ego is, they call him a Celestial in the movie, which is odd. I guess they're changing what the Celestials are from the comics, even though we saw one previously in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Is what it is. Ego is a Celestial. And what he is a living planet who can manifest himself in a human form, in any form he wants to take, pretty much. And he chooses the form of Kurt Russell because obviously if you could choose any form in the world, you would choose the form of Kurt Russell. So it makes sense to me. And his goal ultimately is he wants to eradicate all life in the universe and basically seed his essence and terraform all the planets so that he is the only one who remains. But he doesn't have enough power to do it on his own, so he needs Peter Quill. He's been impregnating women on thousands, millions, billions of planets, possibly trying to find a progeny that has the same powers that he has. And Peter Quill is the only one that we know of that was successful. So after Ego hears of the events of the previous movie that this seemingly human being was able to channel the power of an Infinity Stone without dying, he makes the connection, oh, I think this must be my son, and he goes off to look for Peter Quill and takes him to his planet. He appeals to this longing that Peter Quill has for a family and a father figure, because he doesn't come out right away and be like, we gotta kill everyone and I need you to help me. He says, you know, I'm your dad. I want to be your father. Picks up on a lot of the story threads that they seeded in the first movie about, you know, Peter Quill's insecurities. And for the most part, it works really well. There's a great subplot with Yondu, who obviously, he's the one who ultimately raised Peter Quill. And they kind of have an adversarial relationship, even though they love each other. And it works really well. The only thing I would say, so there's a ton of subplots going on with all the characters. Most of them revolve around the same central theme, which is family. And you know, you don't necessarily choose your own family. What does it mean to be a family? All these things. And some of the stories don't get, these character interactions don't get as much time as I think they deserve because they want to focus on all the characters. So I'm hesitant to say that's a negative, because ultimately it's to the benefit of the entire cast, as opposed to if we just isolated a couple of them and focused on them more. So if you take any of them out, you shortchange somebody. But I really feel like it was a waste of resources to have this basically the same story happening 3-4 different ways between all the characters. I think that Yondu, Peter Quill, and Ego story, if they had cut maybe one or two of the other stories back, they could have really had something special with that. I think it still worked, but it could have been great. It could have been something really powerful. Rocket also factors into that storyline, but Gamora has the similar themes going on with her story with Nebula. They're sisters. They're trying to come to terms with their relationship. Rocket has a storyline going on with Yondu, which I think you could keep with the Peter Quill Yondu Ego story and kind of just compress them together. And then Drax has his storyline with Mantis, which is the weakest subplot in the entire film. Doesn't work as well. And then Peter also has his romantic subplot with Gamora, which is kind of on the same level. I don't know. I would have pared it back a little bit to focus on the Yondu Peter story a little bit more. But like I said, it's a tough road to go down because you ultimately would have to shortchange one of the characters, and I don't know if that would have been a good idea. If we cut out the Drax storyline with Mantis, what is he doing that he really gets shortchanged? So I guess you have to in these ensemble movies, you really have to try to do a little for every character as opposed to a lot for one. I think the movie could have been better if they had focused on one character, a handful of characters, just to try to nail that one thing. But it's still great. I think there's payoff and character development for all the characters that works. So, it's not too much of a negative. But that is something that stood out to me. Drax, Dave Bautista, he was really great in the first movie, and it was kind of eye-opening that he had this, comedic timing and charisma. Something I never picked up on watching him in the WWE. He's great in this movie as well, but he can get a little bit grating. And it's not his performance that's the problem. It's the way they've written the character and some of his dialogue. He's a goofball, and it can be a little much sometimes. But it also works because even on a team with a humanoid raccoon and a tree monster, he almost seems like the most alien, and he's just a green guy with red tattoos all over his body. He's so different than everyone else, and he has his view of the world is really contrasts every other character's. So that's interesting, but it can be a little bit much. Mantis is the weakest part of the movie. She serves a purpose near the end of the movie. She can use her empathic abilities to put Ego to sleep. She joins the Guardians of the Galaxy and helps them out. I don't know. One of the problems with these that Marvel is starting to have in both the TV scape and the movie scape is they have so many characters. And instead of paring back, they just keep adding more characters. I anticipate this is going to be a massive problem on the Defenders series, where Luke and Daredevil and Iron Fist and Jessica Jones are all teamed up, but also all of their side characters are going to come for the ride, it seems like. That's an aside. But, there's so many characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy now. And then they keep adding more characters. And it's already becoming a little much to juggle everyone and give them their own screen time and make sure everyone is treated with some reverence and gets a story that matters. It's going to be something they need to look at if they're going to go forward. Because what are they going to do in Volume 3? They're going to add more characters. And then do we still need Nebula around? Do we still need Mantis? Is Mantis going to come along? you know, they need to pare it back a little bit. You know, just because they have this rich backstory and you know, cast of characters they can draw from the comic books doesn't necessarily mean they have to. Obviously, Yondu, he plays a big part in this movie, and he's great. And spoiler alert, he dies, and it's a very powerful and emotional scene. So he won't be coming forward in the next movie. But they do set up some other Ravengers who, spoiler alert, it's Stallone. He's a Starhawk. And the cast of in the comic books, what we would know as the original Guardians of the Galaxy. So are those characters now going to be part of Volume 3? Because that's like Starhawk, Charlie 33, I think is his name. I can't remember all the names of the original Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not a big fan of them. But it's like 5 other characters. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. Hopefully they pare it back a bit. We'll see. One problem I kind of have with the movie is that it breaks the cast of characters up into smaller groups, so they all go on their own solo adventures before meeting up again. They all work, but it is kind of, the cast has such chemistry together that it's kind of disappointing that they don't all get to play off each other as much as you would like. Drax and Mantis are basically doing their own thing. Peter and Gamora are doing their own thing with Kurt Russell, the Eagle character, and then Yondu, Groot, and Rocket are together. Nebula is involved in that story until she goes off to do her own thing. So the characters are all kind of segregated. The stories they tell all work, but it would be nice to see the characters interact with each other a bit more, because the cast works so well together. It's a minor issue, is what it is. Yeah, it's a great movie. Great story. Soundtrack is great. Don't think it is as good as the first movie. Still pretty good. Yeah. Don't have a whole lot of negatives to the movie. These are just nitpicks. You know. The movie has like 5 after credit scenes. They're not really anything important. It sets up a angsty teenage Groot. That's pretty funny. Maybe they could pare the comedy back a little bit going forward, but yeah. The Sovereign characters, I almost wonder if you could write them out entirely and then instead of paring back on one of the subplots for the other characters to focus on Peter and Eagle, you could just kind of write the Sovereigns out. And then instead of the time devoted to those characters, you could focus in more on the adopted father versus biological father who doesn't necessarily have the best intentions for his child dynamic. Yeah, but still, it's a great story. Really liked it a lot. I'll have to see it a couple more times to gauge where I would place it in the Marvel pantheon of movies. Right now I would say that Captain America, The Winter Soldier is the best Marvel movie, followed by Guardians 1. Where does Guardians Volume 2, and I guess I would say probably Avengers 1 is the third best movie. That's my inclination right now. I'll have to see Volume 2 to see where it pairs up. I don't think I would rank it higher than any of those 3. So it doesn't fall in the top 3, but it's a really good movie. It's the best Marvel movie that's come out in a while. I would say it's easily better than Doctor Strange, easily better than Ant-Man, easily better than Captain America 3. Not that those movies are bad. I think they're all good to serviceable to great movies, but Guardians Volume 2, it's the best Marvel movie they've done in a while. I would really recommend checking it out in theaters. Peace.